Say goodbye to your credit card rewards. Greedy corporate mega stores, led by Walmart and Target, are pushing for a law in Congress to take away your hard-earned cash back and travel points to line their pockets. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would enact harmful credit card routing mandates that would end credit card rewards as we know it. If you love your credit card rewards, tell your lawmakers, hands off my rewards. Tell them to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of Mrs. Goutfire to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. And the logical fallacy we're taking another look at this week is moral equivalence. Mrs. Goutfire, it just conjures up overdressed, overmade up, stumbly circulation sufferer.
Yep.
Perfect.
So, moral equivalence. This was the third episode we ever did, way back in 2018.
Yep. Wow.
So, we're having another look at it with some more up-to-date examples and our new perspectives gained from years of doing this shit now.
I know. But also, it's... And I say it every time we do these reduxes, you think we've done that one, so we've cured the world of it.
Everyone would have stopped doing this by now.
Stop using that.
Because we we mentioned it online.
Yeah. We're preventing people one fallacy at a time.
Well, back in those days, we were getting maybe like 50 or so listeners an episode. So,
wow,
that's going to have a ripple effect that will stop people using these fallacies, isn't it?
Yeah. So hopefully we're providing a service to be able to slowly chip away.
Definitely.
And eventually everyone who makes these kind of mistakes will just die of old age. But no.
Yeah. Or
not true.
These are just inherent to the human condition and it's worth learning about them so that you can try and be a bit less likely to do it. But we'll never actually get rid of them.
Call them out. You can spot them happening.
Yeah.
And not lay down and just let the outrageousness continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
So moral equivalence fallacy is basically when people claim that two very different actions are just as bad as each other, often therefore providing some kind of cover for their thing they did or someone that they did by saying, it's just, it's no different to what those people did that you like.
Yeah. So there is a judgment going on. It's not just what they're doing is the same as what they're accusing me of. There's that moral aspect of, well, you say what I'm doing is bad. Look at them. You're adding in a moral bit, which might not necessarily be applicable.
Yeah, and often it's kind of suggesting hypocrisy in some way. It's suggesting that people are treating you or your allies differently to how they would treat people who they agree with.
Right. Yep.
So in our first example from Trump, he's talking about the January 6 insurrectionists and how they've been treated by the Department of Justice.
And those people are being treated, many of them are being treated unbelievably unfairly. Compare that to what happened in the riots where Black Lives Matter and Antifa killed people. They killed people.
So this
Did they though?
Well, people, yes, there were a few deaths in the summer 2020 protests, there was also looting and property damage and stuff like that.
Right.
It did happen. As we've discussed, the leftist framing that the protests were mostly peaceful, which is much derided by the right, is largely accurate in as much as there were around 2,400 protest events tracked by ACLED and around 200 of them, less than 10%, around 7%, involved some violence or property damage. So mostly peaceful, meaning well over 90% didn't involve any property damage even at all or any violence. And the protests that did turn violent, in some cases, were due to perhaps overzealous policing or counter-protesters who were also violent. That's not to say that none of the people who were protesting on the side of BLM got violent. That did happen. But suggesting that protesting for the right for black people not to be killed by the police.
Yeah.
And attacking the seat of government based on a lie about which guy won are not the same.
They're not, but
suggesting those things are the same is not logical, doesn't follow, isn't proper cognitive reasoning, and suggesting that also the people who did the insurrection are being treated unfairly, and the BLM protesters, look at what they did. They did the same, basically the same stuff, just as bad stuff, and got away with it, like weren't treated poorly. That's just not true even. No. They didn't do the same stuff. The motivation for doing the stuff they did was dramatically different.
And the amount of stuff that was done that led to violence was 90% less.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely say that it was a minority of the people involved in the January 6th insurrection who were violent. I think that's probably fair, that there was a much higher percentage of those people who, you know, they trespassed, they went through Congress, they went through broken windows and doors and stole stuff in some cases, wiped feces on the walls, you know, did property damage and things like that, but some didn't. And the people who actually were violent was probably a minority. So in that sense, it may not be a terrible comparison, but suggesting that the BLM protesters got away with it, essentially got away with all the bad stuff that happened, is absolutely not true.
Guys didn't.
There were around 14,000 arrests just in the first month of the BLM protests, and a lot of those, not the majority, but there were well over 300 that went to trial and resulted in convictions, and the average length of time that those people ended up spending in prison was 27 months, over 2 years.
Wow.
By comparison, of the 749 federal defendants, this is as of January this year, who have had their cases adjudicated related to January 6th, around 467 were sentenced to periods of incarceration, of which the average was 48 days.
Whoa. What?
So quite a lot less than 2 years plus.
Yeah. It arguably sustains the principles that the BLM protests were protesting
arguably
against.
That the largely white January 6th insurrectionists have been treated differently to the largely black BLM protesters, but not the way Donald Trump thinks.
Yes.
So our second example is a pretty fucking blatant one, because it is from a reply to a tweet by Alexander Vindman, who tweeted after Putin murdered Alexei Navalny. He said, Navalny was murdered by Putin. This needs to be called what it is. Condolences to Alexei's family. And Dinesh D'Souza, our good friend, replied to Vindman's tweet saying, Navalny equals Trump. The plan of the Biden regime and the Democrats is to ensure their leading political opponent dies in prison. There's no real difference between the two cases.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. There's no real difference.
There are some differences.
Wow.
If you really think about it.
When you come to think of it, there are,
like,
yes.
For example, the fact that Navalny didn't commit any crimes and was put in prison for being Putin's political opponent.
Yes.
And then was killed in prison. By comparison, Trump committed lots of crimes, and the process of bringing him to justice has been incredibly carefully and time-consumingly done.
Yeah.
He hasn't seen justice yet, and every indication is that they are taking their extreme care to make sure that it is done in a way that is responsible and fits with the law.
Yes, and the accusation that they're doing it from political motivations can't be levelled.
I mean, it is being levelled, but it's not. It's disingenuous at best.
Yes, yeah. Wow.
Speaking of disingenuous people on Twitter, ABC News analyst Matthew Dowd tweeted in November of 2016. This tweet was subsequently deleted because he was called out on it by basically everyone. He tweeted, either you care both about Trump being a sexual predator and Clinton's emails, or you care about neither, but don't talk about one without the other. Because those are the same.
Those are the same. Basically, no real difference.
Openly boasting about grabbing women by the pussy is the same as using a private email server.
It's
just as bad.
It's just as morally wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, personally, that it is reasonable to think both of those things are not great, but prefer someone who was a bit careless with her emails to someone who attacks women. Yeah. I think of the two, I know which one I would be more willing to forgive in terms of if I had to vote between them.
Yes, I'd be less outraged by when it came to the polling booth. Yes, exactly.
And I don't feel like you have to bring them both up.
Either that, or you've got to care about neither of them.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to care more about one than the other, or less about one. You have to care about them equally, or not at all.
Yeah, because either your candidate is perfect, or you can't say anything negative about the other candidate. Yeah. That's essentially what this boils down to.
Yeah.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
Well, I thought for once that we'd start out quite light. So here's LBC's Shelagh Fogarty in June 2023 talking about Rishi Sunak's silence on Boris's fate at the hands of the Select Committee, looking into whether he had misled Parliament, which he had.
I just think it is unbelievable that one of the most serious sets of findings against a British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, how can the current Prime Minister not have anything to say about that, of any meaning about the committee's findings? I mean, it's the moral equivalent of hiding in the fridge, isn't it?
So that's which is referring to the day that Boris Johnson hid inside an industrial refrigerator, a milk bottling plant in Yorkshire, to avoid being interviewed on Good Morning Britain in 2019 in the lead up to the election in December that year. Whether Boris's actions were a moral standpoint, because at that time we'd not even had COVID or Wallpapergate or Partygate or misleading Parliament. We had illegally proroguing Parliament and all the other immoral nonsense that Boris drags around with him like pig pen out of Peanuts, cloud of dirt whenever he moves. So drawing a moral equivalence, one would have to have a noticeably morally dubious position to compare things to.
I mean, cowardice? Is cowardice a moral issue? Arguably, that's what Boris was displaying in avoiding being asked hard questions by not particularly tough journalists at Good Morning Britain.
No, that's right.
They're not exactly Pulitzer winners, are they? Morning television.
No. Well, it was Piers Morgan and
exactly.
The other one, Debbie McGee. Yeah. So drawing a moral equivalence, you need a noticeably morally dubious position to compare things to. Otherwise, it's fallacy. Speaking of which, our second example, Rishi Sunak, on the 1st of March, made a speech on the steps of Number 10, the day after George Galloway got elected in Rochdale for the Workers' Party of Britain. George campaigned in opposition to the government and the opposition, so the Labour Party's stance on supporting Israel's actions in Gaza. Sunak's speech opens up with a trio of guilt by associations, similar in unfoundedness to his recourse to using Corbyn to smear Starmer, and then he goes on to do a multi-layered, I am going to argue, set of moral equivalences.
Last night, the Rochdale by-election returned a candidate who dismisses the horror of what happened on October the 7th, who glorifies Hezbollah and is endorsed by Nick Griffin, the racist former leader of the BNP. I need to speak to you all this evening because this situation has gone on long enough and demands a response not just from government, but from all of us. Since October the 7th, there have been those trying to take advantage of the very human angst that we all feel about the terrible suffering that war brings to the innocent, to women and children, to advance a divisive, hateful ideological agenda. Membership of our society is contingent on some simple things: that you abide by the rule of law, and that change can only come through the peaceful democratic process. Nearly everyone in Britain supports these basic values. But there are small and vocal hostile groups who do not. Islamist extremists and the far right feed off and embolden each other. They are equally desperate to pretend that their violence is somehow justified, when actually these groups are two sides of the same extremist coin.
So despite George and the Workers' Party of Britain abiding by the peaceful democratic process to bring about change, i.e. through the ballot box, because he won, we have this weird equivalence. Because Galloway doesn't support Israel's actions in Gaza, suddenly we have a nationwide problem with extremism.
Both sides extremism as well, not just...
Oh, yeah. Oh, we'll come
not
to
just
that.
the extremism we actually have a problem with.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We'll come to that. What he's doing is making the election of George Galloway something that does not abide by the simple values of British society, that somehow it's not right to elect an MP on a one-theme protest vote. When Galloway won, he stood up and said, this is for Gaza. So it's like a one-issue protest thing, which ignores the vote Tory to get Brexit done, one-issue election in 2019, by the way. And consequently, this is not abiding by those simple values of democratic process in Britain. And thus... this is a vocal and hostile group. He's then layering the equivalence that pro-Palestinian protesters, including Galloway, are people trying to take advantage of the angst felt around Israel's war in Gaza and are thus Islamist extremists. And that they are as extreme as right-wing extremists, aka Nazis, possibly. So there's this weird bits of equivalence going on in there. And of course, this also glosses over the rise of the hateful and divisive policies from the same Prime Minister who made Suella Braverman his Home Secretary. Braverman called the pro-Palestine... Yes, he called the pro-Palestine protesters hate marchers and was sacked after she criticised the police for being too lenient towards those pro-Palestinian protesters. And as a result of what she said, right-wingers defended the cenotaph on Armistice Day against the Palestinian mob. The pro-Palestinian marchers peacefully marched about a mile away. And Sunak also made Lee Anderson his party's deputy chairman. Lee Anderson had the whip removed, in effect sacked from the Tory party, for saying that Sadiq Khan had sold out London to his Islamist mates.
I think part of this is an Overton window issue.
Yeah.
Because you could plausibly make an argument that there are equivalencies, not that they are necessarily equivalent, but that actually extremists on both sides could be seen as equivalent. Those who think that killing other people for your cause is perfectly fine, for example. And there are those on both sides. However, what they're doing is defending extremists on the right who are essentially committing genocide and calling people who are anti-genocide extremists.
Yes.
Which is very weird.
Yeah.
If you call them extremists, you can say they're as bad as the extremists on your side who you are currently defending.
Exactly, yeah, because that's the point of calling somebody an extremist is to make them they're having extreme views. And you could be right that the Overton window has moved so far over to be able to support genociding, committing Zionists.
Especially when the people who are controlling the conversation, the people in power, essentially, who are saying this is how I define these people, essentially, it may be not the Overton window as a whole of society deeming what's okay to say and not say, but it's at least in that conversation that they are having at the time. There's a mini Overton window, I think, that is they're redefining the sides of it and what's outside the window of acceptability.
And of course, anything that is outside of the window of acceptability, so anything that doesn't contain Suella Braverman and Lee Anderson, are extremists. And it was just the oddest thing. He came out apropos of nothing, apropos of George Galloway doing what he'd done twice before. He did it once under Blair and said this is for Iraq, to crystallise a protest vote in a democratic election process is now an extreme act. Of course, it wasn't when the Leave vote went through, when that, it wasn't then, no, because that's Tory party policy. So, it's Tory party policy is to defend Israel's right to defend itself. And anyone that disagrees with that is a hate marcher.
Defending Israel's right to defend itself. I keep feeling when that comes up, a great example of an Iron Man fallacy.
Yeah.
Because when they are literally defending their right to do it however the fuck they do it, no matter what horrific means they use to defend themselves, and then say, oh, I'm just defending their right to defend themselves. You know, you wouldn't want them not to be able to defend themselves, would you?
Yeah.
You're so Iron Manning your own argument and saying, look, this is a completely perfect and normal, reasonable argument you couldn't possibly disagree with, but they're defending all kinds of horrific war crimes.
Yeah. So if you protest against that, then you're labelled as extreme as the extremists that you're accusing extremism of. So in commentary of this on Talk TV, which is another right-wing talk channel with tiny audience, they missed the point altogether. They missed that point, that the equivalence is to make these peaceful protesters the moral equivalent of war criminals. Yeah, they missed that point. And Sam Armstrong, who describes himself as a journalist and commentator, is just basically a right-winger for money.
You don't know. He might be a right-winger in his spare time too.
He might. I could be. I could be hateful in my spare time. Yeah, and that's got you. No, I could be. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he might do it as a hobby. Yeah, a bit of a busman's holiday. Yeah, turning up and shouting.
When you do what you love, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's here he is on Talk TV, making a different weird equivalence.
This country has an unofficial blasphemy code which says if you're going to say something about Islam, you have to say something about the far right. Yes, there is a small, very small comparatively, pocket of far-right extremists that have grown in recent years. We have a terrorist problem in this country, and overwhelmingly it is from the Islamist community. Islamists, those that want to make Islam the political basis of our country, and it has got dramatically worse in recent months. And weekend after weekend, they are marching through London and cities across this country, making the Jewish residents of those places feel terrified to walk out. And instead, what does the Prime Minister of this country do when he's giving a speech faced with this enormous sudden insurgency? He has to create a false moral equivalency. It's disgusting. It's an infection that runs through the metropolitan elite that I'm afraid are still governing the vast bulk of institutions in this country.
So he manages to throw in metropolitan elite in there, of course, which you kind of go, oh, he is a conspiracy theorist after all. Yeah, that's right. You got it. Yeah, yes. But he kind of, so I'm not sure what the false moral equivalency he accuses the Prime Minister of making. Is he making an equivalency? It's a false moral equivalency to liken right-wing thugs with Islamist extremists. Is that the false moral equivalency? It seems, no, these right-wing thugs, yeah, we've got a problem with it. It's growing a little bit, but they're not as bad as his massive insurgency.
That is what he's saying. Yeah, I feel like you're saying that mockingly, but yes, that's exactly what he's saying.
That's exactly what he's saying.
The right-wing extremists that we have are not as big a problem as the Islamists.
Yeah, so what you've got to do is make the Islamists an enormous problem, such that London is a no-go area because it's been sold out by Sadiq Khan to his Islamist mates. And so I was thinking, well, okay, who are these Islamist extremists that are descending on London weekend after weekend? Oh, it's the same peaceful pro-Palestinian protesters making Jewish citizens' lives a misery, which is kind of odd because Hackney MP Diane Abbott pointed out that groups of Jewish people join regular London marches in solidarity with Palestinians. And she said, it's nonsense that pro-Palestinian marchers make London a no-go zone for Jews. Blocks of Jews at every march is complainers that don't like the cause. And Reuters have published many pictures of pro-Palestine protesters being hugged by smiling Orthodox Hasidic Jews. it's perfect photography because the Hasidic Jews have got a particularly
very
visual
identifiable
representation, very identifiable as a visual representation of the Jewish community in North London.
Yes.
And the fact that they are present, standing next to somebody who looks very Arabic and very Palestinian, smiling, shaking hands, hugging, gives the lie to the Tory party line that the peaceful anti-war in Gaza protesters are Islamist extremists. And we know that's the party line because Robin Simcox, the UK's counter-extremism czar, who oddly looks like Martin Sheen playing an actual czar, said recently, rather oddly phrasedly, we will not have become an authoritarian state if London is no longer permitted to be turned into a no-go zone for Jews every weekend. So
okay.
It's one, yeah. So we will have become an authoritarian state if London
if we keep
is
allowing
permitted.
it to be a no-go zone,
right.
which it isn't.
No,
yeah,
it isn't. It's not. Yeah, so it's the party line. So what Sam?
Well, hang on.
Armstrong
how is that an authoritarian state?
Yeah.
If we allow something, authoritarian is mandating something must or must not happen.
Yeah, which is exactly what Suella Braverman wanted to do.
Yeah, she wanted to mandate that they weren't allowed to march.
Weren't allowed to march.
That feels a little bit more authoritarian
policy
than allowing protest.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and in doing so, Sadiq Khan has sold out to his Islamist mates. You know, both Suella Braverman and Lee Anderson got fired from the Tory party for saying those things.
Yeah.
So how is Rishi able to stand outside and make this speech? He said, "I've got, George Galloway has won this protest, and I've got to have this conversation with you because it's all gone too far." The people that said that, you fired them.
Yeah, but he didn't say it in the same racist words. So
no, that's
they've
true.
got to. They were fired for not hiding their racism better.
Yes, they were not allowed to retain their jobs because they didn't.
They were a bit too loud about it.
They were big, whereas he and you look at this thing, and it's 10 minutes long, this speech, and it's political word salad. Doesn't say anything, and he layers moral equivalency one upon the other. I am going to cut it up and use it as an advert for the next Outburst gig. See if I can get him to say outrageous things, more outrageous than he already has.
You're the head of the party, it's some kind of curse. You're as bad as each other, and they're just as worse. You're the cure for Viagra in Parliament Hall. You think you're superior, but you're nothing at all. You're the same kind of bad, the same kind of bad as he. You're the same kind of bad as he. The same kind of bad as he. On the opposite aisle, think they're fresh out the mold, but their crocodile smile betrays them of old. There's blood on the floor, and the thunder and roll, and the boat just won't sink, and we don't sleep awake. You use the same kind of fallacies, the wild kind of fallacies. You're the same kind of
Tom Waits there with As Bad As Me, his famous moral equivalent track.
So, in the Fallacy in the Wild, we like to talk about the fallacy of the week from a non-political perspective, and our first example this week comes from Halt and Catch Fire, the period computer technology drama.
That's weird, hearing period and computer technology.
Yeah,
in the
well,
same
it's the start of the kind of development of home computer stuff that drives the narrative, really. And so in this episode, Bosworth, who is, part owner but also a classic salesman, heads to the home of one of their lapsed subscribers to see if he can kind of turn them around and get their subscription back.
I'm head of customer satisfaction at a company called Mutiny. I just came by this morning to apologize to your son here about all our network hassles this week and see what I can do to bring him back into the Mutiny family.
Nothing. I'm the one that canceled the subscription, okay? He's been racking up hundreds of dollars on my credit card. Can't remember the last time they had a friend home from school. I mean, you video game companies are no better than drug peddlers.
Yeah.
And Bosworth, being a superb salesman, manages to talk this woman round by pointing out, or kind of letting her figure out, that actually her son doesn't really have any friends at school, but he's got loads of friends online thanks to their game, thanks to the community aspects of the service they provide. So, yeah.
But, you know, as we all know,
just as bad as drug peddlers, the video game companies, because of the transactions that they require, and they just, you get hooked.
And the addiction.
So it's just as bad.
Yeah.
So our second example comes from Criminal Minds. Yeah. And this is quite a weird one, because this is Agent Prentice having a bit of a kind of existential crisis at the end of an episode.
What's up?
Bobby Baird asked me a question that's sticking with me.
What was it?
She asked me how they could do it. How those men could hunt and kill people in the woods.
What'd you tell her?
That they don't think like we do. But the truth is that we do think like them.
Yeah, we do. Because it's our job. We need to know how it feels.
We hunt these people every day. The question is, how different are we? Us and them.
Pretty fucking different, because they are hunting for fun and killing, whereas the FBI's behavioural sciences unit are hunting criminals to bring them to justice.
Yeah, to stop
them from killing people for fun. Kind of arbitrary murder. Yeah, do you think the script was written by a serial killer? Term gamekeeper. It's really quite weird, because, I mean, if you think about it for a second, it's pretty fucking obvious that while, yes, part of the job they have to do to catch the bad guys is think like bad guys, that's kind of the classic trope. And then hunt them down and possibly engage in gunfire. Yeah, and they hunt them all the time. And, I mean, this episode was about people who kidnapped people, released them into the woods, and then hunted them. So it's it's about the tracking people down and hunting them aspect of it. But still, the motivation is important. Also, what happens when you catch them? That's quite important too. Would take them through the due process. That would point out that what they did, the bad guys, was bad. Are we really any different to them? Yeah, but it's that kind of the argument that brought about the end of the death penalty, fundamentally, isn't it? We've got all these murderers, and then we are just organisationally and constitutionally murdering them. And in fact, that is such a trope that it has a page on TV Tropes, which is don't kill him, then you'll be just as bad as he is, kind of thing. Of people taking righteous revenge on murderous bastards who've done horrific things to them. So common in literature and in films and TV is some character saying, you don't do it. You'll be just as bad as them, which isn't the same thing. It's not the same to finally take revenge on your oppressor as it is to be the oppressor. Yes. But still, that's the plot. Well, it's basically the plot for Death Wish. Yes. And everything else. So finally, in this section, we have a comic take on a very common advert that we used to get in the UK. Oh, I remember this. An anti-piracy ad that was on all VHS and DVDs that you would rent. And then the IT crowd did a jokey version of it.
You wouldn't steal a handbag. You wouldn't steal a car. You wouldn't steal a baby. You wouldn't shoot a policeman and then steal his helmet. You wouldn't go to the toilet in his helmet and then send it to the policeman's grieving widow and then steal it again. Downloading films is stealing. If you do it, you will face the consequences.
these anti-piracy ads are getting really mean.
So the first few lines of it were pretty much exactly the real ad. It was you wouldn't steal a handbag, you wouldn't steal a car. Downloading films is a crime.
It's the moral equivalent of stealing a policeman's helmet and defecating into it. Yeah, exactly the same.
Sending it to the policeman's widow and then stealing it again.
Yeah. So if you face the consequence, you will get shot by the FBI. Yeah.
So we're gonna play
Fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game.
I understand the game as well as anybody. As well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for Fake News, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
Because I've realised making me go through this time after time is as bad and as sadistic as making someone learn piano scales day after day for like 10,000 hours just so that they can one day become a virtuoso at it and like really good. Yeah. I see what's happening now, and actually, I'm quite grateful.
This is training. That's what this is.
Yeah.
So our theme this week is fake news and what fake news will say.
Oh, we got a bit meta.
Yeah.
Okay.
He likes to predict what the fake news will say about things that he has said or is doing in the future, and then get very annoyed about the fake news in his imagination saying it.
Oh, okay. Right. Right. And even more annoyed when they don't even bother reporting it.
Doesn't matter, because by then he's not at the rally anymore.
He's done it.
So,
yeah.
So, statement number 1. Look at this crowd. Nobody's ever seen a crowd like this, and they won't show this, the fake news back there. They never show it. What they'll do, and I call them the enemy of the people, and I really think it's true. It is true. What they'll do is they'll take a photo of a single empty seat, and they'll say, Trump didn't fill the arena. And the reality is we've got people lined up outside begging to get in. Hundreds of people. Can you believe it? They lie like dogs.
I love that when it goes, they call them the enemy of the people, and I really think it's true. It's true. It's just gone from him making something up. I call them this, and to it escalates by the end of 2 sentences. It's a fact. Yeah. Okay.
Statement number 2. Every single president on Mount Rushmore. Now, here's what I'd do. I'd ask whether or not you think I'll someday be on Mount Rushmore, but here's the problem. If I did it joking, totally joking, having fun, the fake news media will say, he believes he should be on Mount Rushmore. So I won't say it, okay? I won't say it. But every president, they'll say it anyway. You watch, tomorrow. Trump thinks he should be on Mount Rushmore. Isn't that terrible? What a group. What a dishonest group of people.
Because the other thing he does is hides his absolute burning desire to be on Mount Rushmore by saying, so if I am joking, if I was totally joking, having fun, they would say he still believes he should be on Mount Rushmore, which he does. So he is that kind of some sort of projection thing going there. And then he calls them, for saying what he secretly desires, he calls them dishonest. Or they will say this about this.
Yeah, he calls them dishonest for saying it in his imagination, though.
Yes, exactly.
That's the key.
Yeah, and
he doesn't wait for them to say it and then call them dishonest.
Yeah, he's saying they are dishonest, but it's true. I think it's true. It's true. It's true. Yeah.
So, statement number 3.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I've got to interrupt. You know, the fake news will say, oh, he goes from subject to... No, you have to be very smart to do that. You've got to be very smart. It's called, you know what it is? It's called spot checking. You're thinking about something when you're talking about something else. Bop, 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 bop. And then you get back to the original and they go, holy shit, did you see what he did? That's amazing. It's called intelligence.
They don't say that's amazing. They go, that's a sign of cognitive decline. That's right. Yeah. Holy shit, I can't believe we're buying this nonsense. Yeah, okay, so now that's, you see, to my brain, it's called intelligence. My brain is running from, okay, so is that now a very smartly written Trump-like thing? Because it's got he goes from subject to subject, which is the tell of a Trump type thing, which indicates to me that that's one that you've made up. But then that's what I'm supposed to think, so I don't know that it is. Oh, man. Okay, so I think the number one that's just resoundingly true, but then that might mean that it's wrong as well. Mount Rushmore. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go with my gut, which is to say that number 3 is the one that you made up.
Okay, so the other two, which are you more convinced by?
I think I'm more convinced by the look at this crowd. Nobody's at number 1.
Okay.
Any of the people really think it's true. It is true.
And number 1?
The crowd think, yeah.
It's fake news.
Oh, fuck! Oh, man!
How the mighty have fallen.
Nicely done. Yeah. I know. What the fuck? Yeah, look, and I just even convinced myself that that's why that one should be because it's mild and solid and all that kind of realistic. That's the equivalent of Boris's non-shouty
it's
one.
As bad as Boris's non-shouty one, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, man.
Yeah. That was not true.
Oh, no, that does mean that that does mean that number 3 is real. No.
Yeah.
Oh, that is awful.
That means number 3
That's awful.
is indeed real.
I got to interrupt. You know, the fake news will say, oh, he goes from subject to... No, you have to be very smart to do that. You got to be very smart. It's called, you know what it is? It's called spot checking. You're thinking about something when you're talking about something else, pop, 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 and then you get back to the original, and they go, holy shit, did you see what he did? That's something. It's called intelligence.
That's right.
Yeah.
I got to interrupt. He comes in like Schnozzle Durante.
That's him interrupting himself.
Yeah.
That's who he has to interrupt. And that's the point, is he cannot make it through a thought. And that's called intelligence. That's like a sign of how brilliant he is. Is that he cannot finish a sentence without getting distracted like the dog from Up and saying something else.
Squirrel! Yeah. Wow, I got spot checking. Yeah. What the... Oh, man, it was... Yeah, see, it was so Trump.
Yeah.
That it was Trump.
Yeah. And the thing is, I read that he'd said this, but they didn't quote it exactly. And what they quoted, I thought, oh, this is brilliant. I have to use this. And then when I found the actual quote, it was way better than I even thought. Because they hadn't said the bot bit or anything.
I know. That was... no, man, oh, man.
Yep.
That means, then the thing about Mount Rushmore...
That is also true.
Every single president on Mount Rushmore. Now, here's what I do. I'd ask whether or not you think I will someday be on Mount Rushmore, but no. But here's the problem. If I did it joking, totally joking, having fun, the fake news media will say, he believes he should be on Mount Rushmore. So I won't say it, okay? I won't say it. But every president, they'll say it anyway, you watch tomorrow. Trump thinks he should be on Mount Rushmore. Isn't that terrible? What a group. What a dishonest group of people.
What a dishonest group of people I just made up in my head. They're really dishonest, the people I made up.
the fake news media, which doesn't exist. It only exists in his head. If I did ask you that, people would say he thinks he should be on Mount. Well, why would you ask the question otherwise? He just tells lies. He just lives
You're just noticing
on lies.
This.
Yeah, and then blames other people who point out the fact that he's telling lies. He will lie about the fact that they will point out that he's telling lies and then decry them as dishonest people. for pointing out, even though he's just made them up. Oh my God. No wonder it's hard to spot the one that you made up, because they're just, fuck.
Well,
yeah.
It turns out number 3 is a popular choice among our social contestants.
Right. It's,
So,
well, you knew it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
a gift.
Every now and again, you just come across one of those that's gold.
You just go, I'll get them every time. Yeah.
So Anders on Patreon says,
the
trip down, I'm sure I have this from memory lane, where it's all too easy to become the laughing stock. It's only when you realise you've heard all 3 sometime long ago that the alarm bells go off, then it's too late.
Yes.
What to do if found out? Delay. Therefore, I pick number 3 to be fake. The only logical solution, because it puts off making a fool of myself the longest.
Because it's the last one. Yeah. Feel your pain, Anders.
Richard Thunder Hopkins says, tough one. I have to say number 3 is fake news, but only because of the S-bomb. I don't think I've heard Trump swear at all. It offends the Bible-bashing conservatives and also baby Jesus. Number 3 you made up. To which Will M rightly points out he curses like a sailor when not in front of the teleprompter. Yeah, he's been doing it more and more. There are findable clips of him at rallies and in front of crowds saying all kinds of swear words. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh,
maybe I'll do a compilation for 150.
Yeah.
But And then Will gave his own answer. He says, Jesus, Horatio Christ, the man's a fucking buffoon. Number 2 is fake, is my guess. Sad. Renee Z says, I'm going with 3 as fake news. He says bing, 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 not bop, 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 doesn't he?
That's true, yes. Yeah.
My brain is scrambled. I'm finishing up my tax return, which is due on Monday.
Right. A thing which Trump hasn't done for years.
Yeah.
So, fair enough.
On Facebook, Peter says, I so want 3 to be real. I mean, bop, bop, bop is priceless. Talk about insane ramblings of an orange pumpkin. Yeah. Andrew says, going with 3 because of how much coverage the bit bop boop garnered, and I'm pretty sure this isn't where it came from. Maybe it was a different bit bop boop that you saw, Andrew.
Right.
And
you won't have said it just once.
Yeah. And Donna doesn't technically make a guess, but just points out we need an exhausted emoji here in the US.
Yeah. Well, it'll be a guy with a really bad hairpiece, wouldn't it? Kind of orange. It'd be an orange emoji.
That's not an exhausted emoji. That's something very different.
But it would.
There's already a poop
all
emoji.
Of the flesh would kind of with a kind of air coming out. So yeah. Right. Wow.
So unfortunately, that means that you have not won this
won
time
for ages.
Well, you won a couple of weeks ago, but since your amazing run of 12 in a row.
I know,
I think you've picked the fake news twice as your most likely one, which I'm enjoying greatly.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. Yeah, no, I know. Having had the when we did the Presto Changeo swapped over version, it is an addictive drug.
Yeah.
To it's as bad as video games. Yeah. To write something that is so convincing, but also to find one that is so obviously fake looking that you can then sneak one in above it. Man, I'm going to have to listen to myself a bit more rather than go with my gut. My gut is useless. It's stupid. It's not smart at all.
Try your brain.
Yeah, I've got intelligence. That's called digestion, you fool.
And it's time for the part of the show that this week at least is called The Presidential Records Act is Not a Logical Fallacy. I was almost calling this the Presidential Records Act is still not a logical fallacy, because I'm sure we talked about it before, but I think it was in the context of the Clinton Socks case when...
Oh, yes, it was.
Because that was what led Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton to suggest to Trump that he could use the PRA as a defence in the Florida case, where he's accused of exactly what he did, which was taking lots of classified documents and presidential records to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, which is nothing to do with the Presidential Records Act.
Absolutely.
He's using it as a defence because he's breaking the terms of the Espionage Act.
Yes, because the thing that he's been indicted on in Florida is largely on the Espionage Act. That's what 32 of the charges are on individual documents that are classified.
Yeah.
He's still breaking the law on the non-classified presidential documents that he took.
Right.
But it's the classified ones that they've kind of focused on because that's going to be easier, and it is based on the Espionage Act. And it's the kind of willful retention and refusal to give them back when Nara asked for them over the course of a significant amount of time. And then I think there's 8 charges that are around obstruction, on making false claims that he'd given all the classified documents back, hiding them from his lawyer and from Nara and the FBI and so on.
So his defence involves an interpretation of the Presidential Records Act, which in no way allows him to do what he wants it to do.
Not in the slightest. The PRA, apart from anything else, is a civil law,
right?
And the Espionage Act is a criminal law, and it's quite rare for a civil law to trump a criminal law.
Yeah.
And also, his interpretation of the PRA is exactly the opposite of what the PRA is.
She says,
like 180 degrees from what the entire law was created for, which was to make it so that people like Nixon couldn't just take stuff that was presidential, say, this is mine, and then profit from it. Yeah. And so Trump's theory is that he totally gets to do that. Basically no one else other than the president can have any reviewability of him saying, these things are not presidential records, they're personal records, they're mine, and I can do what I like with them. And that isn't true. That's the exact reason the law exists in the first place. But, crucially, it is nothing to do with this case. And none of the charges relate to or mention. None of the indictment mentions the Presidential Records Act, because that's not what's being raised. So this was a motion to dismiss that he... or his lawyers put into the Florida court in February, 22nd of February. And it was based on the fact that you should dismiss this case about all of these classified documents that I had, because actually they're my personal records. They're not presidential records. They're not classified documents. I declassified them with my mind, and they're all personal.
Right.
And it's fine.
Okay. He made them personal records because he had declassified them by acts of mind.
The argument was that he made them personal records by dint of just taking them to Mar-a-Lago. Right. The act of doing that indicated that, as far as he was concerned, they were personal records, and no one gets to say any different.
Yeah, the law about taking secret records away from the secret place, it's in breach of the Espionage Act when it applies to him as president.
Yeah.
Right, but only him. I don't think that people, if Biden gets re-elected and they said, well, I can do that, then they'll just go, no, you can't do that.
Well,
so only Trump can do that.
See, Trump's theory is that Biden also did that. In fact, everyone does it.
Oh, yeah.
Because Obama did it, even though he didn't.
Yeah.
And Biden did it, even though he only did it a bit and then immediately gave them back as soon as they discovered that he hadn't.
Yeah. I didn't try to
it's all the same.
Show them to other people. Yeah.
So Eileen Cannon, the judge in Florida, did not rule on that motion to dismiss.
Right.
This is leading up to this month now. We're in April.
Yeah.
And so still hadn't ruled on his motion to dismiss based on the PRA, which is obviously a nonsense request.
Yeah.
And should have been ruled on pretty quickly. And she should have just said, no, this is nothing to do. That's got nothing to do with this case.
Member of the legal profession.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What she did instead was she asked the lawyers on both sides to give her proposed jury instructions. In this case, there's not even a trial date for the case. Technically, it's still scheduled for May. I think it's May 25th, I think. Mm-hmm. But everyone knows it's not going to happen then because she's been delaying. So there literally isn't time to get all the stuff done. She's got a backlog of rulings that she hasn't made yet. So it's not going to happen in May. So we don't know when the trial is going to happen. And jury instructions are a thing that in some jurisdictions happens just before the trial starts. In a lot of places it happens during the trial. Because the jury instructions are given to the jury at the end of the trial before they go and deliberate. They're the judge's opportunity to explain some things to the jury that will help them to make their deliberations. So quite far out, at least 2 months before the trial was due to take place, and it's not going to happen then, she's asked both sides to come up with jury instructions, but based on 2 very specific scenarios, not just general ones. Right. She hasn't said kind of, let me know what you think I should instruct the jury. She's laid out two scenarios, the first of which is the basis that the PRA gives the president the right to claim any documents he likes as personal at the end of his presidency, which is not what the PRA does. It's the opposite of what the PRA does. The second scenario, you might think, would be the opposite of that. Write me a jury instruction based on the fact that isn't true. But no, the second one also misstates the law. The second one is she directed the parties to write instructions for a scenario in which the jury has to determine whether the documents Trump is accused of illegally retaining are presidential or personal. Each of the documents, each of the 32 counts. So that's not what a jury does. A jury specifically is a finder of fact. They do not rule on legal issues. They don't decide legal things. The judge does that. That's their job. The jury figures out what they reckon the facts were around the case. Whether each of these records is a personal record or a presidential record, is a legal issue. That is for the judge to decide, not the jury.
Yeah.
So both of those scenarios are mad.
Yeah. So has anyone pointed out the madness?
Oh, yeah.
And say, what the fuck are you doing?
Trump's lawyers didn't.
No, of course not. No.
I mean, in a way, they kind of, in a way they kind of did. They wrote an instruction for the one that gets the jury to decide. But for the other one, they didn't even bother writing an instruction. They basically said, well, if you were going to instruct them that the PRA lets the president claim documents are personal, you should just give us the case. We win in that scenario.
Right.
So you should grant our motion to dismiss that we put in in February.
Yeah.
Whereas Jack Smith's side, their response to it was a little bit more factual. And yet legal. A little bit snarky, because they're dealing with an incompetent judge, and essentially
Trump appointed, Trump fan.
Yeah. So first of all, they said, okay, you have to rule on the motion to dismiss, because we need to know if you believe that the PRA is a viable defence. Because it shouldn't even be brought up in this case. If you think it's a viable defence, rule on that. And then if you rule against us, if you rule that it's a viable defence, we can immediately go and appeal it to the 11th Circuit, which we will, because you're wrong.
Yes.
And they said it stems from a fundamentally flawed legal premise. So a bit more legally. But they said, you're wrong if you think that. So tell us that's what you think, and we'll get it sorted out. We'll go and tell on you.
Or we'll convince you that you're wrong. No, we'll show you that you're wrong.
We've already told you you're wrong, because we answered the motion to dismiss. So we've pointed out you're wrong. You need to actually make a ruling. But then they suggested not 2 but 3 different jury instructions. The first one was maybe tell the jury what the actual law is.
Oh, there you go.
You could correctly instruct them that this case has nothing to do with the Presidential Records Act, and he's being indicted on the Espionage Act, which is a criminal law, and the PRA has nothing to do with it. You could correctly do that. Or, since we've been instructed to give you instructions on these other 2 scenarios, you could lie to them and tell them that the PRA gives Trump the right to decide. You could do that. That would be wrong. You would be lying. But you could do that. Sure.
Yeah.
You're the judge. And for the other one, for the one where the jury gets to decide on each document, they basically said, here's all of the laws that pertain to this and why this is wrong. And then you could say to them, despite all of that, I'm asking you to decide.
You should just say,
So it was quite kind of, it was quite snarky. Yeah. So, following their submissions, Judge Cannon did rule on the motion to dismiss. She ruled in Jack Smith's favour against Trump. She said the Presidential Records Act does not provide a pre-trial basis to dismiss.
But leaves that open to, you might be able to do it during a trial.
Absolutely. Which is way worse.
So it's no ruling at all.
No, because if she had dismissed at this point, then Jack Smith could have gone to the 11th Circuit and said, this is clearly mad, and the 11th Circuit would have overturned it.
Yep.
But if she allows a jury to be seated, once that happens, jeopardy attaches. So that means that whatever happens from that point on, if Trump is found innocent by the jury, found not guilty by the jury, or if they reassert the motion to dismiss on the PRA grounds, and at that point she says, sure, why the fuck not? Case dismissed.
Yeah.
Smith can't do anything about it. You can't appeal at that point. You can't indict him again for the same crimes.
Yep.
So it's important that he gets an answer before the trial starts as to what is going to happen. So they said, basically, one of the parts of Jack Smith's team's response to the mad jury instructions question was to say, let us know what you think you're going to say about this. Having given you our versions, tell us if you are going to say the jury can consider the PRA in their jury instructions, because we need to know that and we need to be able to then appeal that. Obviously, they did it more legally than that. They said, the government must have the opportunity to appeal pre-trial.
Yeah.
Her response to that was, she said, to the extent the special counsel demands an anticipatory finalisation of jury instructions prior to trial, prior to a charge conference, prior to the presentation of trial defences and evidence, the court declines that demand as unprecedented and unjust.
The fuck?
She brought it up.
She brought it up. Yeah.
She said, what should I say to the jury? Jack Smith said, well, here's what you should say. Tell us what you're going to say. And she was like, I'm not telling you what I'm going to say. That's insane to ask me this early.
Fuck off. So is there no way that they can get rid of her overseeing this thing?
Well, there's a few options open to Jack Smith at this point. Yeah, he could make a motion for her to recuse because she's made a few batshit rulings now. And George Conway on his podcast said that according to discussions he's had with people in that district, in that area, because 11th Circuit covers, I think, Florida, Georgia and Alabama, they kind of have an unwritten 3-strike rule where if you make a wacky decision, they'll say, well, watch out for that. But if you make 3 in the same direction that seem to benefit one side, they'll have a conference and they'll say, look, maybe we should give this to another judge. So that's a possibility. She's definitely done that by now, appointing the special master to look through the documents, and she's done some wacky things that all seem to randomly favour Trump.
I don't think it's random. I think it's
So that's a possibility, but it is hard to get a recusal based on bias, and so I think probably Smith is waiting for it to be just undeniably obvious that she is sticking her thumb on the scales.
Yeah.
Which, you could argue we're there, but probably he's going to give her a bit more rope.
Yeah.
Some people have suggested that he could get a writ of mandamus, which basically it's a court telling the judge or any federal employee to do their job, to do a thing.
Yeah.
So maybe if she doesn't rule on the jury instructions that she asked for, like he's not asking, he didn't ask for final jury instructions. That would be mad at this point. He just asked if she's going to include the PRA in the jury instructions, or if she thinks that it's a viable thing. So if she doesn't rule on that, theoretically he could get the 11th Circuit to make her do that, to make her make that ruling.
Yeah.
But I think what is most likely, and I would say probably what he'll do, is a motion in limine about the PRA specifically. A motion in limine is a pre-trial motion to restrict a certain testimony, so to keep something out of evidence being given in trial. And it is used by both sides. It might be used, for example, to remove some evidence which is prejudicial, where the usefulness of that evidence to prove something might not be as strong as its likelihood to prejudice the jury against someone. So that kind of thing might be excluded at trial. And there's a danger if that's brought up, even though the judge will then say, stop that, you're not allowed, strike that from the record, the jury still heard it.
Yeah.
So there will often be a pre-trial motion to say, no one's allowed to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that would be the thing, to make a motion to say
can't even mention the
Trump
PRA.
Can't raise the PRA as a defence, and the judge can't say presidents are totally allowed to do this.
Yeah.
She would have to rule on that. If she didn't rule on that and try to set a trial date and try to start jury selection or anything like that, he could then again get a writ of mandamus to make her rule on that pre-trial, so that there is on the record something saying yes, she thinks this is fine, or she won't say anything about it. So it's not the end of the world at this point, but what is being, in some cases, reported as a win for the government in terms of she's ruled against the motion to dismiss and in favour of the government is not fully in his favour. It's leaving that option open for her to dismiss after jeopardy attaches at trial, which would be the end of the case.
End of the case, yeah. And it's just so obviously and patently biased in favour of Trump that it's appalling that you've got to find legal means to call that out rather than just to say, what the fuck are you doing?
It's either obviously and blatantly in favour of Trump, or she's completely incompetent.
Yeah.
And she's a reasonably new judge. She's only done like 5 or 6 cases.
Right.
But prior to that, she was a lawyer.
Yeah.
She must know the law to have got that far.
Surely to even, well, you know, we say that. But...
Yeah. One of the things that is most ridiculous, when Jack Smith gave this response to the request for jury instructions, it was seen by some, although it was quite respectful and very well legally written, it was understandably seen as a smackdown on the judge.
Yeah.
Basically telling her she didn't know what she's talking about. And Trump, who, as we know, is very respectful to judges as a whole.
Oh, yeah.
He said Jack Smith should be sanctioned or censured for the way he is attacking a highly respected judge, Eileen Cannon, who is presiding over his fake documents hoax case in Florida. He's a lowlife who's nasty, rude and condescending and obviously trying to play the ref.
Nice.
That's Trump.
Which, weirdly, is exactly what Trump has done.
Absolutely.
On every other case that is being brought against him, because he thinks that everybody should bow down and allow him to do whatever he likes because he's a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he hasn't quite made it through the terrible twos.
Also, we have the Bond case, the one that he was originally to pay the $454 million bond.
Yeah.
And then it was reduced to $175 million.
Yeah.
He posted that bond, but that actually, although it stopped Letitia James from being able to start proceedings to seize his properties, is not necessarily the end of the story.
Right.
Because Letitia James filed a notice of exception to the sufficiency of the surety.
So basically she's saying...
This bond isn't worth the paper it's written on.
Worth, yes, exactly. So worth this bond.
Yeah. And that's partly because of the ambulance chaser equivalent Bond guy that Trump went to, who is a guy called Mr. Hanky, who I cannot think of without thinking Mr. Hanky the Christmas poo.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And he's called Don Hanky,
Hanky,
is even better, isn't it? Yeah.
So Mr. Hanky the Christmas poo is...
number 2. Yeah.
He's a billionaire MAGA donor, for one thing.
Right.
He's also a subprime auto loan provider.
Right.
So he will give money to people who can't really afford to borrow money for a car, and then when they end up not being able to afford the loan, will come down on them hard and take their cars.
Basically, it's a repo man.
Yeah.
Dangles it out, lures them in.
Yeah.
He's a Venus flytrap of a loan.
Yeah.
So not somebody you would want to go to.
So his insurance company, who Trump supposedly got this bond from, first of all, when they put the paperwork in, they didn't provide their financial statement. Initially, that was thought of as just an error, and it was sent back by the clerk of the court and said, to be corrected.
Forgot this bit. Yeah.
But it's possible that they didn't include it because it shows that they don't actually have the money to cover the bond.
Right.
Or at least not according to New York laws. First of all, it's not authorised in New York to issue surety bonds, so it can't get a certificate from the New York Department of Financial Services, which is usually part of the package of the bond. So they didn't provide a certificate saying that they're able to do it. New York has laws about how much money state-regulated surety companies can post on a single bond in terms of a percentage of their capital and surplus. So surplus for an insurance company is all of their assets minus all of their liabilities.
Yeah, because you've got to be sure that if you're posting a bond to provide the security that should they need to, they could come get the money you've got to have the money available.
Yeah, so even if all of the people
Yeah.
who you've insured suddenly need to claim on that insurance all at the same time,
Yeah.
you need to be able to pay them all.
Fair enough.
Which is the same reason that banks have
Yeah.
to not be over-leveraged, because if everyone decides to take their money out all at one go,
Yeah.
then you can't say, well, I'm sorry, I don't have it.
Your shoebox with your cash in it, we're
Yeah.
using it to build a hospital in Africa.
Yeah. And so that limit in New York is 10% of the firm's capital and surplus.
Right.
And according to the financial documents that they did eventually put through,
Right.
Knight Specialty Insurance have a $138 million surplus.
Oh,
The bond
well,
is
that's-
$175 million.
Yeah, that's more than...
It's 127% of their surplus,
Yes.
which is
not
a little bit more than 10.
7, yeah. By an order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Hankey, the Christmas Pooh, said that it's all right because I have this other company that has like $1 billion.
Okay, well, and that's... I hope the people that heard that threw their hands in the air and went, well, yeah, you sound exactly like Trump who said, yeah, I've got 500 million in cash. I just don't want to, I just can't show you it. I've got a unicorn in my cupboard. You just can't see it. Yeah.
So supposedly Knight Specialty's parent company has a surplus of $1 billion or $1 billion in equity at least.
Right.
But it's not named on the bond paperwork. So that company wouldn't be liable for the money.
Yes. Yeah.
So it would only be Knight Specialty Insurance that would be liable for the bond.
And when they can't come up with it,
well,
they're not going to go to the parent company.
Here's the brilliant thing, though. It doesn't really matter how much Knight Specialty Insurance has. They could have nothing, and it wouldn't actually matter because the way the bond legal document is written.
Yeah.
This is from a thing in the Daily Beast.
Yeah.
They said, in reality, a strict reading of bond number 350588 shows that even the smaller company isn't technically on the hook for paying the $175 million if higher courts ultimately cement his loss to the AG. Buried in the typical legalese of the contract is the phrase, Knight Specialty Insurance Company does hereby undertake that if the judgment is dismissed, Donald J. Trump shall pay the sum directed.
Whoa.
So they're not even promising to pay it. They're promising Trump will pay it.
Wow.
Normally, a bond would be jointly and severably liable. So if Trump won't pay, the bond company pays. That's not in there.
So what they're saying is if the bond company's got to pay, Trump's got to pay.
Trump's going to pay, yeah. They're not saying they'll pay anything.
So actually, him saying, well, the parent company is got this massive amount of assets, but the bond paperwork said we're not even liable.
Yeah,
so
meaningless.
I'm in no danger of losing any of this money because Trump's going to pay it.
Yeah.
What kind of bond? What? Yeah,
it's almost like he doesn't know what he's doing, or he knows what he's doing more than Trump does and has kind of crafted it in such a way that it's meaningless and just hoping that the government doesn't notice.
Like people who have been trained. It's, oh my God, it's Rudy Giuliani all over again, isn't it? It's that we'll just do these things and say this stuff in the hope that long established organisations that are government funded or that hold governments to account won't notice. They won't have checks.
It's not
and
like they've
balances
done
in
this
place.
before or anything.
No, they won't have procedures in place to stop people doing this kind of thing. No, but turning up in a court of law with a drunk, they won't have. They won't have any. They won't have any of those systems in place to stop that happening. I can outsmart them. I was once the mayor of New York, Jesus Christ.
So, I mean, there's a couple of other small things, like the fact that normally a bond would cover interest and costs as well.
Yeah.
This one specifically says the liability of this bond shall not exceed the sum of $175 million, which is not how that usually works.
Yeah, because the interest is going up.
Yeah.
Daily anyway.
There's the fact that they don't talk about where the collateral comes from, because initially they said it was bonds, then they said it was cash, then they said that he hadn't actually given them the cash, he just pledged the cash essentially, which is, again, not usually how that works. And after that, they said it was held at a brokerage firm and Knight Specialty Insurance could access it if needed. But they don't say that Trump can't access it, so there's nothing to stop him from taking it out. Also, if he has 175 million, and maybe this is my not understanding how bonds work, but I don't understand why, if he has 175 million in cash, why he's paying Knight Specialty Insurance to
over the
pay
odds,
the bond,
to underwrite
because he's
it.
paying them a fee. Although a low fee, according to Hanky, the Christmas poo.
Right.
Because he says actually he's regretting now that he didn't charge Donald Trump more because of the scrutiny over the bond, and that he's getting a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls. Maybe it's part of the reason why Trump had trouble with other insurance companies. But
weirdly. What did he think he was getting into?
I don't think he knew, because he said he charged him a low fee, although originally he said he charged him just the same as he would everyone else. But being a subprime auto loan man, his traditional interest is 19%, which is a fuck ton more than bonds would normally be, somewhere between 1 and 10% usually. But he says it was a low fee that he charged him. And part of that was because he considered it a low risk, which is a bit weird, given that this is a man who is such a high risk that there literally wasn't another bond company or bank in the world that was prepared to loan him the money.
Yeah. Where has this guy been? Has he been on a different planet? Has he paid no attention to? Has he been underwater or something for 4 years? What the fuck? He's just. Does he exist? Is he real?
He's a real guy. He's not a Christmas poo. He's a real guy.
Right.
And
it's not just been made up by Trump.
Yeah.
In order, and then he's written a bond in Sharpie.
The final dignity is that, according to ProPublica, they have found that several days before the bond was reduced from 454 to 175 million, Hanky had said to Trump that he would give him the full amount, the 454.
Oh, right, okay.
So when Trump's lawyers went to the court and said, we've been everywhere, no one will give us 454, we can't do that, it has to be lower, they were lying.
Wasn't true. Whoa.
Which is fraud. Coincidentally, exactly what Trump is being tried for.
Yes. So no surprises there then. Yeah. And finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
We're just hours away from Trump's first criminal trial in Manhattan, and the former guy is eager to get going so that he can prove his innocence. Oh no, wait, he spent the past week in a panic doing everything he can to delay or dismiss because he knows he's going to lose. Of the many motions Trump's lawyers filed, a few were dealt with by Judge Merchan himself. He turned down a request to delay the trial because of negative pre-trial publicity, arguing that the publicity isn't going away and that Trump himself was responsible for most of it. He dismissed Trump's attempt to delay the trial until the Supreme Court rules on presidential immunity because they left it till the last minute, and also several of the crimes in question happened before he was president. Merchan also refused a motion to recuse himself, just like he did when Trump's lawyers filed the same motion back in August. The New York Appeals Court has also been busy refusing Trump's motions, starting with one on Monday asking them to delay the trial while they consider his request to have the trial moved out of Manhattan on the grounds that the jury pool has been polluted by news coverage of Trump's other legal cases. Where could they move it to when nobody's heard of what's going on with Trump, you ask? He suggests Staten Island, where he won in both 2016 and 2020, not that nasty Democrat Manhattan area. On Tuesday, the appellate court turned down his request to delay the trial while he appeals the gag order that prevents him from going after court personnel and their families. Merchan expanded the gag order when Trump kept attacking his daughter. Incidentally, in our last episode, I incorrectly said that she'd posted anti-Trump memes on her social media, but it turned out that wasn't her account. Sorry about that. And on Wednesday, another appellate judge refused his final request to delay the trial while he appeals Merchan's rulings on immunity and recusal. So that's it. He's out of delays, and it's time for 12 New Yorkers to be chosen who will decide whether millions of people will be voting for a convicted felon in November.
When you've gone into the religion business, huckstering the word of God, you get to make proclamations about the Lord, like you're an insider, a member of the Holy Quadrinity, you know. So when last Friday the White House issued a proclamation recognising the Sunday of that weekend as Transgender Day of Visibility and called on Americans to join us in lifting up the lives and voices of transgender people throughout our nation and to work towards eliminating violence and discrimination based on gender identity, like they have done every 31st March since Biden came into office. Apostles of God's representative on earth, no, not the hippie kid with the beard and the wet soles of his feet, His Holiness the Dope, Donald Trump, took to the socials angry. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican, accused the White House of having betrayed the central tenet of Easter, which is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, banning sacred truth and tradition while at the same time proclaiming Easter Sunday as Transgender Day is outrageous and abhorrent. The American people are taking note. Trump campaign spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt called on Biden to issue an apology to the millions of Catholics and Christians across America who believe Sunday is for one celebration only, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So why she distinguished Catholics and Christians is beyond me and probably her. The banning Mike Johnson referred to is probably to do with the long-running Easter tradition in which children of National Guard members submit decorated eggs to be displayed at the White House. Rules have been in place courtesy of the American Egg Board for 45 years and include that designs must not include any questionable content, religious symbols, overtly religious themes, or partisan political statements. So those that do aren't allowed in. Same rules under Trump, of course. Meanwhile, Senator Raphael Warnock, yes, Democrat, reminded us that Jesus centered the marginalized. He centered the poor. And in a moment like this, we need voices, particularly voices of faith, who would use our faith not as a weapon to beat other people down, but as a bridge to bring all of us together. Meanwhile, Joe went to church on Easter Sunday. Trump didn't, because he hates it when that collection plate comes round.
As Ebony and Ivory taught us, there is good and bad in everyone, and I think it's important to remember that even someone like Donald Trump has value. For example, without Trump, Peter Navarro and Alan Weisselberg wouldn't be in prison right now. On top of that, he's making millions of arseholes poorer, both gradually by continually grifting them for donations, and incredibly quickly by convincing them that Trump Media is a great investment. The company, which owns Truth Social, began trading on the Nasdaq on March 26th, and the share price quickly spiked to $79.38. Since Trump owns nearly 80 million shares, this meant his stock was worth around $6 billion and meant that for the first time he made it onto the Bloomberg Billionaires Index, a ranking of the world's 500 richest people. Heavily invested followers cheered him on, mocked anyone who's ever laughed at his business acumen, and posted gloatingly on social media about being tired of winning. It didn't last. The share price plummeted day after wondrous day, assisted by financial disclosures that revealed Truth Social made $4 million in revenue last year but lost $58 million. Last Tuesday, having lost more than $3 billion of his personal wealth in just over a week, Bloomberg kicked Trump off the Billionaires Index, and it just kept on going down. The price dipped below $31 a share on Friday before closing at $32.59. Another $500 million loss for Trump. I'm really enjoying watching him lose vast amounts of money in real time. But the best thing is that no matter how bad it gets, thanks to a 6-month lock-up period, he can't sell any of his shares until late September. So I get to keep hitting refresh and laughing all summer long.
Jim Jordan, who heads the House Judiciary Committee and its subcommittee on the weaponisation of the federal government, continues to weaponise the power of the federal government. He's getting a bit miffed that big companies are not advertising on his dear friend Donald Trump's social media platform Truth Social. Of course, according to Jordan, it's nothing to do with protecting the reputational harm and brand safety of long-established international hard-won credibility and customer loyalty on the part of the likes of Procter & Gamble when choosing not to advertise to conspiracy theorist nut jobs, secure in the business knowledge that most people are actually turned off by conspiracy theory nut jobs and get a negative impression of advertisers who cater to them. Advertising companies speaking up and suggesting, hey, maybe we shouldn't help fund websites pushing fascist ideology or pushing the drinking of bleach as a healthcare solution. Jordan is pretending violates the law, sending missives out saying the World Federation of Advertisers, WFA, through its GARM initiative, may be acting inconsistent with the US antitrust laws and congressional intent by coordinating GARM members' efforts to demonetize and eliminate disfavored content online. If nothing else, it's a way of spending citizens' tax dollars that would otherwise go on soap and washing powder. And it's sure to please cash-strapped chump. So well done you, Jim Jordan.
Yeah, he claimed it was censoring conservative voices not to advertise on Trump Social.
Yeah.
The party of small government.
That's not how advertising works. Yeah. And he leads the subcommittee on the weaponisation of the federal government, investigating things to stop that happening, and then he goes off and does it. Because, it's censoring conservative voices. No, it's people going, the people on here are mad. It will do our products reputational harm.
Yeah, and they're private companies. They get to do whatever the fuck they want with their advertising budgets. That's, right. That's the invisible hand of the market.
So
you're supposed to like that shit.
Yeah.
Since Easter, Trump has compared himself to Jesus, Nelson Mandela, and his old favourite Abraham Lincoln. I'm not sure the Mandela story is a close parallel to the possibility of being thrown in jail for continually attacking the family of a judge overseeing the case where he falsified business records to cover up the hush money payments he paid to a porn star so voters didn't find out he slept with her while his wife was at home with their new baby. But the Lincoln comparison has never been as relevant as last week when, thanks to Trump, the Arizona Supreme Court was able to take women's reproductive health care all the way back to 1864. Following the Dobbs decision, the ruling allows Arizona to enforce a 160-year-old ban on all abortions unless the pregnant person's life is at risk. When the law was written, Arizona wasn't a state yet, slavery was still legal, women couldn't vote, the age of consent was 10 years old, and doctors were undecided on the germ theory of disease, but many of them were still convinced their main job was balancing people's fucking humours. The timing couldn't have been much worse for Trump, coming just one day after he disappointed his more rabid anti-abortion followers by walking back his promise to sign a federal abortion ban given the chance, with a video on Truth Social saying it's up to the states to decide. A state then decided, and he didn't miss a beat before saying they'd gone too far.
Okay, so Democrats didn't control where Easter fell. There were long-established church deference to math charts and moon phases and weirdly non-Christian planetary astronomical stuff involved. Nor, of course, do Republicans control solar eclipses. However, Julie Green, a charismatic preacher and self-styled prophet who claims to channel God on the daily, bringing divine news to a devoted following from a home studio in Iowa, had a special guest on her show on April 4th, prophetic guest named Larry Ballard, who claims he died in 1968, returning to life after a serious accident with supposed heavenly insight. I checked, but he doesn't appear to be Paul McCartney's stand-in from 1968. Together, they unpacked the spiritual symbolism of the coming eclipse. They were quite taken with the fact that the path of totality crossed Eagle Pass in Texas, as well as a great swathe of the planet over that away, a lot of it water, but I digress. There's no coincidence about Eagle Pass, Green said. God is saying they can't pass through me because he is our line of protection. God is our border. He's our refuge. He's our fortress. And God is saying no one can get past me. Apparently the higher power that Green and Ballard exalt is markedly aligned with the MAGA agenda, and less so with the words of, say, Exodus or Matthew that exhort the faithful to not oppress the foreigner and to welcome the stranger. Ballard indeed goes so far as to say Donald Trump is God's anointed, adding that Trump is on a divine mission. He's going to close that border. He's going to drill. God is saying that this is a time of call of repentance as a nation, Green interpreted. It's simply telling America, hey, X marks the spot. All dismissible crackpot stuff, except Green has the ear of people Trump has promised to appoint to positions of power and prominence in a prospective second term in the White House. On April 5th, General Michael Flynn was on the show, displaying a military-industrial sense of piety. As I've always told you, Julie, prayer is still the most powerful weapons system known to man. And I thought that my idea that rhinos would stampede through Mar-a-Lago Jumanji-like because of the eclipse was a bit tonto.
I feel like prayer is the most powerful weapon system known to man is a testable claim, and we should test it against Michael Flynn.
Yes.
I don't think that test would last very long.
No, not since, the thing that swept the board at the Oscars was about a man who invented a fairly powerful weapon system.
I think there are some pretty not very powerful weapons that would defeat Michael Flynn's prayer. I reckon.
True.
Like a chair leg, hypothetically.
Yeah. Well, even, ironically, a Trump edition Bible to the back of the head.
I don't think his prayer would do very much.
No.
In response to that.
As we all know, the power of prayer and thought being sent to victims of school mass shootings.
Yeah, it hasn't done anything yet. But, any day now.
Another one occurring. Any day now.
Yeah.
Because, now that the literally the stars have aligned and cast a massive shadow across Texas, that's because the anointed one is going to do something about it.
Scrabble has gone woke, according to Fox News. Yes, it may be hard to work out exactly how a game that lets you make any word you like could be woke, but damn it, Janine Pirro and Greg Gutfield will find a way. The facts are that Mattel is releasing a new version in Europe, which, as well as the original, and awesome, game, by flipping the board upside down you get an extra new game, which is more collaborative rather than competitive. There's still a winner and a loser, despite Greg's claims to the contrary, but instead of getting scores for words, you win by completing challenges like expand a word already on the board or play a word with only one consonant. Naturally, according to Fox, this is not only a sign that young people are stupid and too soft, but, says Greg, playing a game without scoring is anti-human. Presumably, Greg has never played hide-and-seek, Risk, chess, Jenga, tag. I'll tell you one game he admits he's never played, Scrabble. Janine goes on to complain that they've removed certain words, but there are also new words that the woke generation would be very comfortable with. Again, since it's just a bag of letters, it's pretty hard to remove words, but Janine clarifies that they banned racist and LGBTQ slurs from tournaments. This is true, but it happened back in 2020, and I don't hear her complaining that you can't play razzmatazz because there's only one Z and two blanks, or gastrointestinal because the board's only 15 tiles long. Maybe she just really wants to play slurs. Well, don't worry, Janine, you can still play them all you like at home, and if you can convince Greg to play, he'll probably teach you some new ones. But what about those new woke words that have been added? Well, that was back in 2022 when the Scrabble dictionary was last updated, and some of the new words were things like bay, stan, and zoomer. So, not woke words as such, just words that young people understand. Which is basically the same thing. Bloody woke young people and their toxic having fun playing collaborative games together.
You know when you get those messages from someone called, Charlie or Abby on WhatsApp, and it comes with a female equivalent of dick pic and a lot of emojis and, hey, sexy, call me. And you know how those of us who grew up with computers know how to deal with them because we learned all about those Nigerian princes wanted to get our bank details so they can deposit £400 million in it. And we've seen reruns of that Monty Python blackmail game sketch show when they reveal compromising pictures of notable public officials until they can call into the show and pledge money. Well, poor old William Ragg MP. No, he's not old. He's only 37, so he's as old as Microsoft Excel 2.0, the image format GIF and VGA, all got invented in 1987. Got taken in by a grinder scam, sending dick pics to people who threatened to publish them unless he gave them other government staff's numbers. So, of course, mindful of the highest level of security surrounding government-issued devices, he, quote, gave them some numbers. Not all of them. So he's resigned the whip and can no longer represent the Tory party. He didn't get bunged out of the party, nor got asked to resign as an MP, because the official line, as ever, was he's apologised and he's going to step down to the next election. And who wants yet another pesky by-election just before a general election? Yeah. What were we thinking? In not being drawn on why he didn't bung Rag out for being a security-breaching idiot, the thing Suella Braverman resigned over in order to leave Liz Truss's cabinet, Rishi minded everyone to be vigilant against cyber attacks that threaten our democracy. Because, keeping apologetic security-breaching Rag as vice-chair of the Tories' backbench 1922 committee and chairman of the Commons Public Administration Committee and re-employing Suella Braverman in exactly the same Home Secretary role 6 days after she resigned under Truss is not threatening our democracy. As Jacob Griesblob said in attempting to discredit the European Court of Human Rights, courts don't hold governments to account, voters do. Yeah, except governments aren't above the law, and if you don't give voters a chance to show just how much they're sick to the back teeth of you because you control the election date, Rishi, then where's the democracy and accountability? In the oft-quoted by Tories words of Oliver Cromwell, you have sat too long here for any good you have been doing. Depart, I say, and let us have done with you. In the name of God, go.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this week. You'll find the show notes at fallacioustrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
If you think we've used a fallacy ourselves, let us know, and if you've had a good time, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, or simply tell one other person in person about how much they like our podcast. And you can support the show at patreon.com/ftrump, just like our strawman level patrons Richard Thunder Hopkins, Will M, Scott, Ozzy on Bank, Laura Tomsick, Schmutz, Mark Reiki, and Amber R. Buchanan, who told us when we met her at QED we could just call her Amber, though another listener recognised her at QED last year because we keep using her full name all the time. And our true Scotsman level patrons Renee Z, Melissa Sitek, Stephen Bickle, Janet Uetta, Andrew Houck, and our top patron Kaz Tui. Thank you so much for your continued patronage. It's really very much appreciated indeed.
You can connect with those awesome people as well as us and other listeners in the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/FallaciousTrump.
All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission. So until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.
You'll find the show notes at fallacioustrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, what I was doing while I was reading that was also kind of scanning down and thinking, did I take Brigham McGilligator's name out of the next section? And I was like trying to read that while
that's
spot checking. It's called intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's smart. Smart, that is.
Yeah.